Okay, so I'm very happy to greet all of you for this session on Sankhya philosophy. And as far as I could see from this model which was shown on the screen, it's the model of classical Sankhya. I will explain a little bit about the Bhagavatam model of Sankhya, which is slightly different than this, with some important addition. And I will first explain the correlation between this model and the findings of the modern science, specifically with the model of Triune brain, with the different functions which are specific to this model. Then I will very briefly explain the model of Bhagavatam Sankhya, and then hopefully I will try to explain the concept of purification of the mind, which is central to any spiritual practice. What does it mean in practical sense in terms of this model? How the different stages of purification are related to this model and what it means in reality, specifically in regard to bhakti style of purification, because there are different concepts of purification. So I will be speaking about this particular idea of what does it mean to purify the mind, or the mirror of the mind, as Chaitanya Mahaprabhu calls it, Cheta Darpana Marjanam. So that's briefly the plan of my presentation today. Perhaps you know the famous model of the brain, which was suggested by some neuropsychologist, Paul MacLean, which is called Triune brain. And this model, based on his or common evolutionary speculation, consists of 3 units of the brain. The most basic unit of the brain, which they call reptile brain, which is in charge of the most basic functions of human body, totally unconscious functions of the human body, and the most fundamental ones. Like self-preservation instinct, sexual impulse and drive, hunger, thirst. It regulates, automatically regulates certain functions of the body, like heartbeat, which do not require our conscious involvement. Or, it's good that they do not require our conscious involvement. Otherwise, we would have to constantly remember that our heart has to beat and our lungs have to breathe, and so on and so forth. So that's the most fundamental part of our consciousness, most primitive part of our consciousness. And then over it laid the emotional part of our consciousness, which is called Limbic system, emotional part of the brain, which is programmed to produce certain emotions, very important for us human beings. Usually we proudly say that human beings are Homo sapiens, but in reality we are Homo emoticus. We are more emotional than reasonable, rational. So that's part of the brain which is in charge of this function of our conditioned consciousness is called limbic system, and it is a part of mammal species so more developed species, from reptile to mammals. And then neocortex, which is, again, according to the evolutionary theories of the modern science, is a new development of the brain cortex. So, you know, if we neocortex, which is more developed only in human beings and certain apes, of which we are supposed to be close relatives. So, if we consider these three layers, although there is a lot of, it's a controversial model, not everyone accepts it, but still it's a very useful model because it very clearly distinguishes the functions of the brain into these three big areas. One is instinctive, self-preservational, and you know, in charge of very basic instincts, let's say. Another one is emotional, which is more reactive, which is more in connection with our interaction with the environment, and which produces basically double signal. I like, I don't like, negative, positive. So this limbic system is programmed in this way, plus, minus. I like, I don't like. And the big spectrum of emotions which is produced by this system of our brain is in between these two poles, hatred and love. And then at last, neocortex, which is a much more complex system, is in charge of our speech, of our more developed thought process, about the imagination, about the prediction of the future, about remembering the past, and so on and so forth. So this part of the brain is called executive brain because it executes very important functions, and it also has a very important role in the cognitive processes, because it is by this part of our brain we recognize things and we interact in a more coherent way with the reality. And by all these functions of imagination and so on and so forth, this part of the brain can tell us what will be the some remote consequences of our actions, whether they will be positive or negatives. This is a unique privilege of developed brain like human beings. We can foresee the consequences of our action and remodel or somewhat change our behavior at present to make sure that the consequences are good. So again, this is a simple model, but it's very useful. And when we look at this model, we cannot, if we know the Sankhya system of cognition, Sankhya theory of cognition, it will be very clear that there is a very direct correspondence between this model and Sankhya model. As you have seen on this diagram and learned during the course, there are three main elements of Sankhya cognitive process, which is Ahankara, the ego, and then mind, emotional mind or interactive mind, as it was said in this diagram, the mind which is directly involved in the interacting with the senses, and the mind which is defining what is good, what is bad. the mind which is telling you this is a good sensation, this is a good experience, and this is the bad experience. So that's this mind or manas, according to Sankhya terminology, is emotional mind, and it has very clear correspondence with this limbic system. And ego, which is according to, again, Sankhya conception, is the representation of earth element. Ego is a very, how to say this, rigid element in our psyche. Therefore, it corresponds to the earth element. Emotional mind corresponds, of course, to water element, and then intelligence or buddhi, rational mind or conscious mind, corresponds to fire. So if we take this model, then the ego system corresponds to this reptile brain. And this is a very important function of ego, because one function of ego is just to make sure that all the necessary functions of our body go on without our conscious involvement. Ego is deeply subconscious, and ego is making sure that we exist. As I said, the main function of ego is self-preservation, and exactly all these instincts which regulates our bodily functions are they are executed from this part of our brain, from this stem brain or reptile brain. So limbic system, as I said, corresponds to mind, and mind, according to Sankhya, has two basic functions, sankalpa and vikalpa, accepting and rejecting. I accept everything which is pleasurable, which is nice, according to my value system, but the value system is deeply ingrained in my ego. So there is ego, which actually rules the whole show, because the most deep instincts are there, and the value system is there. Actually, the mind is not independent. The mind depends on ego. And if we see this diagram of the evolution, or rather involution of consciousness, according to Sankhya, we can see that the mind is a derivative of ego. Ahankara is producing the mind. So Ahankara is the foundation of everything, and it's the most basic and somewhat invisible element of our consciousness, whereas the active emotional mind, with its two functions, accepting and rejecting, liking and disliking, attaching and being disgusted with something, is much more visible and very pronounced in our interaction with the world. And then we have Buddhi, which is rational part of our consciousness, and which is also in charge of the recognition of the objects and proper interaction with the objects according to the system which is there in the intellect. And this Buddhi, basically, when we see the functions of the Buddhi, we can see that these functions of the Buddhi define how accurately the Buddhi works in recognizing certain objects in the outer world. Like sometimes we may have doubt, and it's said that doubt is the function of Buddhi. What does it mean? It means that we see something and we're not sure what it is. It's not a clear perception. So when Sankhya philosophy or yoga or Sankhya in Srimad Bhagavatam explains the functions of the Buddhi, it explains correct perception, incorrect perception, very clear or doubtful perception, which is not clear, then the sleep when there is no perception at all, and memory, which is the main function of Buddhi. Buddhi is this rational mind which goes, which is very active, which has the nature of element of fire, and it goes into the subconsciousness and goes back and forth. Basically, the memory, the mechanism of memory, the executive memory which we have, which is corresponding to this Buddhi function of our consciousness, is the ability of our conscious mind to go into the subconsciousness and to compare the image which we have of something with some stored image in our memory, and then retrieve this memory from the subconsciousness and say, oh yeah, I know what it is. I have seen it, I know what it means. You know, we may see something which we didn't know, but then the function of the Buddhi, which is supposed to recognize these objects, is to go into the memory, very quickly goes through all the files which are there stored in the memory, compare with them. It's a very genius computer-like system, with the search. Basically, Buddhi is the search engine, which sees something in reality, compares with something which we have known and stored in the memory, and saying, oh yeah, that must be this. This is what it is. This is the cow, using the classical example of Sankhya. You see something which you don't know, but you compare it and you say, oh yeah, that must be cow. So again, we don't have time to go too deeply into it. What I wanted to say more to stress that there is a fourth element of our consciousness which is called citta. And Sankhya calls, the classical Sankhya calls this citta as Buddhi, but they actually miss one element. They only have 3 elements of cognition, but Srimad Bhagavatam Sankhya says that the basic element of consciousness is citta, which has the nature of the air. We have 4 basic elements. Earth is Ahankara, then we have water, which is manas, then we have fire, which is Buddhi, and finally we have air, this airy, very translucent layer of our consciousness, which is called citta, and which is actually the primordial to other 3 functions. The Ahankara, Buddhi, and Manas are nothing but angas of these limbs of this complete whole, which is called citta. In classical Nyaya or Sanskrit language, there is Angi and Anga. Anga is a limb, Angi is the whole. So citta is the whole, according to, to Pancharatra theories. Citta is Vasudeva, and Vasudeva, and then we have functions of Sankarshan, Pradyumna, Aniruddha, or Ahankar, Pradyumna is Buddhi, and Aniruddha is Manas. So they are parts of the whole, which is called citta. Citta has all the functions in it, and the different functions which are there, divided into these 3 categories of Ahankar, Buddhi, and Manas, is nothing but the description of the general functions of citta. So again, I have to be very brief, but what is very interesting, how this involution of consciousness is being described in Srimad Bhagavatam. Usually we say evolution, but this is not evolution, this is involution. This is the opposite process, how, from the most subtle things, the process of gracification takes place. The most subtle thing is consciousness, pure consciousness. Pure consciousness of Atma or pure consciousness of Paramatma. But then the first material element which is overlaid over the pure consciousness is called Mahat, or in our microcosmic scheme of body, it's called Chitta. So Mahat or Chitta, universal intelligence, is most subtle element, which is material, subtly material, laid over the consciousness and kind of covering the consciousness and helping the consciousness ultimately to identify with the matter. So. And this is the first level of gracification. And what happens next, according to Sankhya philosophy of Srimad Bhagavatam, then this chitta, which doesn't have any concrete form, it doesn't have any roop as such, because it's air. Air is formless. But this chitta, becomes very gross due to the overlay, or how to say this, superimposition over this chitta, the gross element of earth, which is Ahankara. So we have subtle, pure spiritual consciousness, which is a completely irreducible, different entity. Then in between we have this chitta, which is material element covering our consciousness, but it's still very translucent and it can very accurately reflect the reality. Therefore, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu calls it darpana. It's a mirror. It can reflect the material reality, and then over it we have Ahankara, which is the sum total of different samskaras, different subliminal impressions, different experiences which we have. So these samskaras, sum total of these samskaras constitute the false ego. The Ahankara false ego is nothing but the collection of different experiences which we had in the past. This is the subtle replica of our body. Our body is nothing but the gross manifestation of our Ahankara or ego, and Ahankara or ego is nothing but the collection of our past experiences. And this is compared as the dark cloud which is covering this translucent air of Mahat, or original intelligence of Chitta. So we have this translucent Chitta, and over it overlaid the very dark cloud, the collection of millions and millions and millions of different experiences which we store in our consciousness. And this dark cloud definitely has some shape. It's very gross. Then what happens next? We have Chitta, and then there is Ahankara, which gives it gross shape. And in this shape, which is like mold, because we need to have certain form, certain roop. So this mold is there, and in this mold there is this liquid of our emotions, of our emotional mind, and then the fire of intelligence, which makes the whole machine work. You know, this is the model, the Sankhya model of our human body. What it is first and foremost citta, the intelligence by which we recognize the world, interact with the world. And then, the Ahankara, which is a very gross element of our consciousness, very rigid and very, stubborn element of our consciousness. So Ahankara, the very important function of Ahankara is to separate us from the rest of the world. This feeling of separateness is the main function of Ahankara. I am separate and I am special. It is said that Shambho, Shiva, is a special, representative of the Supreme Lord, who is entering into our individual consciousness and gives us this prithak bhav. The prithak bhav, or the feeling that I am separate from the rest of the reality, or from the rest of the universe, I am unique and I am the center of this whole thing, is coming from Shiva, Mahadev, and that's the key word of our individual consciousness, prithak bhav. I am separate. I am myself. I am independent. This feeling of independence, or feeling of separateness from the rest of the world is extremely important feature of our Ahankara. And actually this feature determines everything else. That's the key, that's the axis upon which everything else, around everything else rotates. All the functions of our body and everything else is supposed to preserve this uniqueness of ours, or our separateness. Or, you can call this prithak bhav by different names. It's basically egotism or selfishness, where selfish by nature. Every one of us has this selfish nature, and that's very strong. It's a very strong element because it's Lord Shiva, Mahadev himself. His amsha, his little portion is entering in our consciousness and creates it. And this feeling of uniqueness, of course, that has some particulars according to the shape of our ego. As I said, the ego is unique according to the experiences which we had, either in this life or in previous lives. So the sum total of these experiences, they constitute our feeling of uniqueness, how I am unique, how I am very special. But the very feeling, prithak bhav, I am special, I am separate, it's there in everyone. How I am special, it determines by our unique individual experiences in this life and in the previous lives. So that's Ahankara. And then we have emotional mind, which is ruled by Ahankara, as I said, because it's Ahankara which determines ultimately what is good, what is bad. And Manas is only obediently, reacting. The program which determines the function of our Manas is recorded in the ego. There is a very peculiar example of this little story when devotees went to Burma, I believe. Then they experienced very strange thing, because the local people in Burma, they take dead bodies of some animals, put them together, and then some juice of it is collected, and they use it as a spice. This completely disgusting smelling, badly juice of the dead bodies. And then the local people, they complained when the devotees went to Burma and they started frying something in ghee, some puris. They complained about the smell of the ghee. They didn't like the smell of the ghee, but they liked the disgusting smell of this liquid. So what I mean to say is that, our likings and dislikings are determined by our past experiences, which is ego. Different people like different things and dislike different things. Something which is very pleasant for one may be very disgusting for the other one. The mind is basically determining or measuring the external experience according to the recorded experience or recorded program, which is deeply ingrained in our ego, or the sense of identity, our unique sense of identity based on our experiences. And then we have rational mind, or Buddhi, which is like, which is connecting all this, going back and forth, going into the memory, coming back to the rational conscious mind, saying this, imagining the future consequences of what we're doing, this and that. So that's what the function of Buddhi means. So then basically how it works, first there is citta, and then overlaid over this citta is Ahankara. Then overlaid over Ahankara is manas. And then overlaid over manas is Buddhi. And that's exactly this model of triune brain, where three brains are overlaid over each other. And they all actually are executing the functions of the heart. Because according to Sankhya philosophy, citta is in the heart, is in the area of the heart, physical heart, but it's sometimes translated as the heart. And indeed, it is in the area of the heart, because there are some neurons in the heart which are connected with the neurons of the brain. And the different neural network which is connecting the brain and the heart, they are there, and the heart is actually controlling the brain. Brain is controlling the heart to a certain extent, but there is more neural connections controlling the brain from the heart, coming from the heart to the brain, then the neural networks which are coming from the brain to the heart. So that's citta, that's the most important function. And these three functions which are overlaid over citta, like Ahankara, manas, and Buddhi, are actually nothing but the contamination of citta. The original citta, by its very nature, is, as I said, translucent, and the amazing quality of this citta, according to Srimad Bhagavatam, is that it can not only reflect the reality as it is in a proper way, but it can also kind of catch the image of God. The people with very clear mind, for them there is no question whether God exists or doesn't exist. Because it's God is their direct experience. It's their pratyaksha. It's something which is directly available to them. And Therefore, it is said in Srimad Bhagavatam that the main function of chitta is Bhagavad Bimba Grahitvat. It has an ability to reflect the image of God. While observing the reality, because the mind of such a pure person is so pure that he can not only see the reality as it is, but he can see the deeper reason or the deeper cause behind the reality, which is God. So, so the main function of chitta is to reflect God, but because all this dirt is overlaid over the chitta, we cannot reflect, we cannot see God. We cannot even see the reality as it is. Because the first contamination which is there in our chitta is ego, and ego is disturbing or not disturbing, how you say it? Distorting the reality. And we see reality through the lens of ego. And therefore, the image of reality which we get by looking at the outer world through this ego, through our, numerous or innumerable experiences, are distorted. We know that, some people had some miserable childhood and they had very painful experience in the childhood. So that has become a part of their ego. And whenever they see in reality, they see it through the lens of these experiences. And that becomes a problem, big problem for them. They cannot, for example, if they were abused by their parents, they cannot trust anyone. They cannot see anyone who is trustworthy. They will, associate with somebody who is totally, completely, 100% trustworthy. They still will have some mistrust about this person, some severe doubts. Why? Because this is how the reality reflected through their ego is being distorted through the lens of ego. And so on and so forth. That's just one example. So, what to speak about seeing God if we have all this stuff overlaid over our consciousness? We cannot see the reality as such. We cannot really interact with reality in a proper way because of Ahankara, manas, and ego. And primarily because of Ahankara. Primarily because of this prithak bhav, sense of independence and sense of separateness from reality, from the rest of reality. So, and therefore any spiritual tradition either implicitly or explicitly, consciously or unconsciously, is working on the purifying of chitta. That's the goal of any spiritual discipline, and any spiritual discipline develops certain methods of how to if not purify completely, but at least to alleviate this contamination which is overlaid over our consciousness. And if we consider the practices of different religious traditions or different spiritual traditions through this lens, we can see that actually there is a lot of common practices and things, because ultimately all the spiritual traditions are dealing, or even philosophical, not philosophical, are dealing with the same problem. This problem is one, contamination over our consciousness. And when, as it is said in yoga, when the chitta vritti completely stopped, when the functions of the mind are completely stopped, then swarupa avasthana, tada drashtu swarupa avasthana, then drashtu, the sakshi, the particle which is endowed with consciousness, the witness, which is our ego, which is witnessing all the processes in our brain and in our subtle body and in gross body and reacting into this Svarupavasthana, it obtains or rather restores the ability to see himself and in case of bhakti, to see God. So every tradition, whether it's yoga or any religion, deals with the same problem, chitta vritti nirodha, and chitta vritti is more or less it's a very scientific description of what contamination of consciousness means. Contamination of consciousness is nothing but the waves on the surface of chitta. And because of the waves, because of these disturbances in the chitta, we cannot really see the reality clearly, and we cannot really see ourselves. What to speak about ourselves? We are looking through this muddy waters of our contaminated consciousness. And when we have the direct experience by purifying the consciousness of us as eternal conscious entities and of God, who is the eternal origin of all consciousness and all matter, in fact, then the problem is solved. As they say in Hindi, afat miti, or something like this. So then it's done. No problem anymore. So what I want to say within a few minutes, which is still within the allotted time, what does it mean to purify the consciousness? I already explained this, but in a more practical sense, and how it works, and how what is the sequence of purification of consciousness. Again, I am very briefly giving some conceptual model which may help you, perhaps maybe in your research or in your thinking process about what is going on in our heart. So, as I said before, the main problem, the root cause of the problem, the deepest, the most deeply rooted cause of the problem is this prithak bhav, which is the essence of Ahankara. And everything else, Buddhi, manas, is the manifestation of this problem, and the peculiarities of our Ahankara, of our ego consciousness, is just, little particulars of this root. This is more or less the leaves and the flowers and the fruits of this root. So therefore, in bhakti process, the first step of purification, which you have to do, and which is unique to bhakti, and which makes bhakti such a radical and scientific process, in fact, is that you have to surrender yourself. They deal directly with ego. Some other processes, they may deal with the problems of our intelligence. They're trying to correct our intelligence. This is good. This is not good. Some other processes are trying to correct our mind and the programs within our mind. Some other processes are trying to correct our samskaras, which is distorting element in our cognitive interaction with the world. Like, for example, psychology. Psychology basically deals with exactly the same problem, but it deals with a particular samskaras, which are again stored deeply in the subconscious, and trying to purify the samskaras, some fear samskara, or some emotional trauma which we underwent in some early childhood. By the way, just for curiosity's sake, I wanted to say why all the samskaras or purificatory rituals are performed in the childhood. It's interesting, the very concept of samskara is you, through the media of the ritual, you create a positive samskara or positive impression within your mind, and it's only possible in the childhood. When the citta is very vulnerable. In the childhood, ego is not so strong, and therefore we can have directly access to citta. But then when the person grows up, his ego also becomes much harder. But in the beginning, citta is very pliable because the ego is not so strong. It's like, the pot, when you make the clay pot, when it's still wet, you can make all different kinds of drawings on the clay pot. But then when you put it in the fire, after some time, you cannot do anything. There is already this patterns in the clay pot because it was burned. So exactly the same thing is happening with us. In the childhood, we can have these impressions easily, and therefore samskaras are done, all the samskaras are done in the childhood. Actually, the last samskara is vivaha samskara. After vivaha, the pot is already burned. no other impressions can be done. So that's the last samskara which we can experience. But before that, when still our consciousness is more flexible and more pliable, then you can have some positive impressions and create more wholesome being. But that was a side remark. My main topic I still didn't touch yet. So, I started. I said that different processes are dealing with different parts of this contamination over citta. Like, for example, repentance. What is repentance? Repentance means that you are, by your intelligence, you remember some bad thing which you have committed, and you dwell on this, and by the fire of intelligence, you basically burn this samskara. By the fire of repentance, you may have some experience, some deeply emotional experience connected with some sinful activity, and every sinful activity actually is connected with some emotions. That's why it's called sin. Sin, if we translate it into Sanskrit, is called agha. Agha means, from the root, verbal root han, agha means agha, something which has unerasable samskara, very deep trace. Impression, yeah. So something which leaves a very deep impression. So for example, what repentance do? It's a very common practice of purifying your consciousness. You remember this thing which left some impression, and you try to undo it. By repentance, by, regretting about this, by making it, or, the same process is being applied in curing people from some addictions. They're addicted to this drug or that drug, and they show them the consequences of this. They, employ their imagination. This is what is going to happen with you if you continue with this habit. So this is all to to a certain extent, alleviate or erase completely some samskara from the consciousness. So that's definitely purifying. There is no doubt about it. Different psychological processes can be very purifying. There are many processes. But Bhakti says, no, let's go to the root cause. The root cause of all problem. We may purify this samskara or that samskara. We may, get little relief by this practice or that practice, but the main problem remains intact. And this problem is so deeply hidden. It's hidden so deeply that we don't even understand sometimes consciously this problem. I am separate, I am unique, I am special, I am independent. I am independent on God. So therefore, the first step in bhakti for the purification of chitta is called Sharanagati. And Sharanagati means I am not independent anymore. You go directly to the root, and you admit that I'm not independent anymore. I don't have this independent existence. I am dependent on God. Who am I? And then this Sharanagati has 6 limbs, which are very interesting and which, in my humble opinion, represent the stages of purification of manas, buddhi, and ultimately Ahankara. So that's the stages of purification of chitta, which ultimately is supposed to allow us to see God. So first, in Sharanagati, what Sharanagati means? I'm not independent. I declare my dependence. The step number 1, I relinquish my imagined independence. I recognize the truth. I'm dependent. I'm dependent on so many things, and ultimately I'm dependent on God. So what does it mean in practical sense? Anukulyasya sankalpa pratikulyasya varjanam. The first step, the first practical step in declaring this dependence is instead of using my ingrained program, this I like, this I don't like, I change this program onto something which is not mine, but which is given to God, which is given by God to me. I'm not saying that this is what I like and therefore I will do it, and this I don't like, this is, and that's why I will avoid it by all means. From the Sharanagati point of view, I'm saying because I am not independent, I do not determine which is good and which is bad. You determine it for me. What you think is good, I will accept as good. What you think is bad, I will accept as bad. If you think that get up in the morning is good, I will get up in the morning because you think it's good, not because there are some scientific reason behind it. It's very interesting that in Vedic culture, they never explained the rationale. Every little Vedic ritual has deep scientific foundation, but they don't explain. Why? Because it's more important for us to follow this without asking why. It's much more beneficial if we just say this. And therefore, anukulyasya sankalpa, if you think it's good, I will do it. Not because it's good by this scientific reason and that scientific reason, because if this rationale is there, I'm still independent. I'm still the judge who determines what is good, what is bad. By different process, by scientific process, no problem. But we're not supposed to kill other living entities. We're supposed to be vegetarian. That's a very basic thing in the rules. Most of the rules of religion or spiritual traditions is what you should eat, what you shouldn't eat. So. That's the basic will of the Lord. The basic will of the Lord is how you sustain your life. by which means you sustain your life. There are some legitimate means and illegitimate means. So the first thing, I purify my emotional mind, my reactions on what is good, what is bad. From this point, I may have some, I may belong to this Burma, and I still may have this very pleasant experience of eating this, liquid of the dead animals. But nevertheless, I say that ghee is good and this is bad. So despite the program which is there in my mind. So that's the first stage of purification, and we can see it works rather quickly. When we adopt the value system which is given to us by the scriptures, this is good, this is bad, this I accept and this I reject, then very quickly we understand, actually this is really good. This is good. This is good not because it is said, but because this is the way I am constructed. This is because the way I am. So that's the first step of purification when we react, emotionally react on the reality, not according to our program, but according to the program which is given to us by God. And the second stage is anukulyasya sankalpa pratikulyasya varjanam rakshishyatiti vishvaso goptritve varanam tatha. The two next limbs of Sharanagati is to understand that I'm not protecting myself. God is protecting me. God is behind everything which is happening with me, and I'm not maintaining myself. God is actually making sure that I get everything. And that's directly connected with Buddhi element. Because Buddhi element is exactly this rational intelligence which, by which we think I'm the doer. I protect myself and I maintain myself, and if I don't do this, nobody will maintain me, and this and that. So this Sharanagati, addressing the problem of the ego, first deals with purification of the mind, then gradually purifies the intelligence. God is guiding me. God is directing me. Like yesterday when I was giving my talk, one person approached me at the end and he said, what would happen with you if somebody else you met? If you met somebody else on your path and you would become something different, you think, I said, no, it's not possible. Yeah. Because, I clearly see that there is some force behind my life which is guiding me. And it's not that I'm completely free to see, and it's not by accident. People with muddy intelligence think that they're free to choose, and everything which has happened by accident, and by their intelligence they have to counteract this negative accidents and to make sure that they're successful. But ultimately, when your intelligence is purified, you can clearly recognize that there is some force behind your life and behind everything which is happening with your life. And again, this is the question of intelligence, of clear intelligence. We're not relinquishing intelligence, we're not relinquishing the mind. At least in bhakti process, we don't try to deny the existence of these very important elements of our consciousness, but we change the program which is within this. So we are understanding more clearly how, there is a higher force behind our life which is guiding us. And then finally, two last limbs of Sharanagati is Karpanya, what is it? Atmanikshepa Karpanyam. Atmanikshepa Karpanyam are clearly related to the ego portion of our consciousness. I become very humble and meek. Karpanyam, I don't have inflated sense of my importance. And Atma Nikshepa, Nikshepa means I literally throw myself down in front of God, Atma Nikshepa. I'm yours. I'm the part of your being. I'm not separate. And that's the last and the most painful and the most difficult element of purification of ego. Because again, the fundamental element of ego is I'm separate. And, by this Sharanagati process, you say, no, I'm not separate. I belong to you. I'm part of you. I'm eternally connected with you, and I'm dependent on you. I'm not independent. So initially, we declare dependence. Like in every country, there is a declaration of independence or Independence Day. And we also celebrate our Independence Day. It's called the birthday, my Independence Day. Here I am. I'm born as an independent living entity in this world. But then our real birthday is when we declare dependence on God. And when we declare dependence, the purification process starts and gradually unravels. And then, our real ego manifests through this process. I am there. I'm individual. I'm individual living entity. I'm Amsha. Krishna says, Mamai Vamsha Jiva Loke. Jiva, the spirit soul, is the Amsha of me, a part of me. So this clear understanding is coming at last. We start from theoretical understanding that I am dependent, I am part of God, but the realization of it is coming last because, again, the ego layer is the deepest layer of our contaminated consciousness, and therefore contamination of ego is the most difficult. And therefore, many people, they adopt external lifestyle of spiritual or religious people. They adopt, rules and regulations, no problem. Many people kind of understand that they're dependent on God, but still they hide deeply down the spirit of independence or the pride. I'm very special, I'm very special in the kingdom of God. Of course, we are very special, but not in the sense as we usually think. So that's how you can utilize this model. And then, as I said, when these three elements, which are superimposed upon our chitta, are cleared, when they become very clean and translucent, transparent, then our ego obtains again three qualities. It can reflect the image of God. It becomes very peaceful, shanta. It doesn't have all these negative emotions, and it becomes free from attachment and hatred. So the Srimad Bhagavatam compares this chitta with pure water. And water means pure water. When we say water, we mean pure water. We don't mean muddy water. Mud is something external which is superimposed upon the water. So consciousness means pure consciousness. And even material consciousness, sattvic consciousness, which we are talking about, we are not talking yet about the spiritual consciousness, means pure. And pure water is transparent. Pure water is very peaceful. It's not being, shaky or disturbed by wind or whatever. And the pure water has very sweet taste. It doesn't have this negative elements or flavors in the taste. So that's what citta is. And when this citta becomes pure, by whatever means you manage to make it pure, and of course, as I was trying to show, that this bhakti process is a very efficient process because it goes directly to the root, then the problem is solved. Then there is no problem because all other problems are derivatives of the main problem, which is contamination over our consciousness. But when we understand reality of us, we understand that we are eternal, that we are not, connected with this body which is destined to die, then, what's the problem? There's no problem. I'm not the body, I'm the soul. But realization of this consciousness doesn't come immediately. It takes some time before all these processes will be completed. So that's basically it.
Thank you, Maharaji. This was very wonderful. I learned so many things. I see that there is a question in the chat. I just read it out to you. This is Sakshi. Sakshi is actually a PhD scholar in Ikshma Center. And she's written, sir, is this defined somewhere that the hierarchy of Mehat, Buddhi and Ahankar is fixed? If yes, then okay. If not, then why? So she's asking about the hierarchy of the Mehat, Buddhi and Ahankar.
Manas, Buddhi and Ahankar. Yeah, it is very clearly defined in Sankhya, which is described both in the 2nd, 3rd canto and 11th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. Mahat is the first element. It's the highest element. And again, according to Pancharatra literature, Mahat and Vasudeva is in charge of Mahat. He is the main, he is the boss. And Sankarshan, Pradyumna and Aniruddha, they are the parts of this whole. So Mahat is the first, and then from Mahat, Ahankara comes. And also in this scheme, after Vasudeva, there is Sankarshan. Sankarshan is the predominating deity of Ahankara, of our ego element, ego mind. And then there is Pradyumna. Pradyumna is the intelligence, and there is Aniruddha. Aniruddha is mind, representative of the mind. So from Ahankar, which is tamasic by nature, we have predominantly sattvic Mahat. Mahat is very, very sattvic. It has, highest percentage of sattva possible, and therefore it's so translucent and so, so beautiful. And then we have tamasic Ahankar, and, sattvic portion of tamasic Ahankar becomes mind, and rajasic portion of tamasic Ahankar becomes Buddhi. So, Buddhi, according to Srimad Bhagavatam, is Rajasic portion, and Manas is Sattvic portion of Tamasic transformation of Mahat, which is Ahankara. So that's the hierarchy of these 4 elements. Mahat on the top, then goes Ahankar, and from the Ahankar, 2 derivatives are there, the Mahat, which is more sattvic, Manas, which is more sattvic, and Buddhi, which is more rajasic.
Thank you, Maharaji. There is also a connected question, I think, which has already been answered, which is what is the difference between Mahat and Buddhi? I think this is already covered from what you have just mentioned.
Yeah, and I can also add that, classical Sankhya, like in Sankhya Karika, they call Mahat as Buddhi. and therefore there is some confusion. It's a different nomenclature. If we accept the version of Sankhya which is presented in Srimad Bhagavatam, then Buddhi is something different than the Buddhi which is described in classical Sankhya. The Buddhi described in classical Sankhya is nothing but Mahat. They call Mahat or Mahatattva as Buddhi because that's the universal intelligence, that's the information field. That's another description, a very important description of what Mahat is, or Buddhi in Sankhya. So please do distinguish between this Buddhi and that Buddhi. That's a completely different entity.
Great. That's why I think these students had this question. Great. Very nice. Maharaji, one small question from my side. This is related to Chitta. And, what I understood is that, of course, I've been also learning, but Chitta is like, some part of consciousness where other parts are like, this intelligence, ego, and, the other, the sense mind. So, is this true as per you that Chitta is like one part of consciousness where the other three parts are
like for example, in yoga they don't distinguish. Even yoga is so closely related to Sankhya, but still they don't distinguish all these things. They only say Chitta, Chitta Vritti Nirodha. So Chitta is the whole. Chitta is Angi, and Ahankara, Buddhi, and Manas are Angas, different limbs of Chitta. Chitta is the whole, and Chitta. But of course, Chitta cannot function without Ahankara, Manas, and in the present. In many, maybe in some very spiritually developed people who somehow or other got rid of other functions, they're just sitting there completely immersed in the pleasantries of their Chitta experiences. Actually, these other three functions, they are just limbs or different functions of original Chitta, of original Ahankara, or original Chitta or Mahat. So, these functions may or may not be there. Like, for example, when we are in a deep sleep, in a deep sleep, this is a very, prominent state of consciousness which we go every night. This Ahankara is not there. We don't have separate existence. The intelligence, of course, not there, and mind is not there. They're all immersed into this, but the Chitta is still there. So the consciousness is still there. And therefore, the very first moment, if you notice yourself, when you wake up, there is no eye consciousness when you wake up. It's just the consciousness. The feeling that I exist, but without I. The feeling of existence, yes, because it's like nirvikalpa pratyaksha. It's the first indeterminate understanding of existence. Exists something, but I don't know what. That's exactly what it is. And then very quickly you remember, oh yeah, this is me. This is me means, I'm Professor such and such, or I am sannyasi such and such, or I am this and that. That comes very quickly, but that's the second element. The first moment, the very first moment, momentarily, we just exist without this, and that's basically Chitta, which is the beginning. And then all other functions there, one by one, then you realize who you are, and then you realize what you like, what you don't like. You realize everything which happened yesterday, which you didn't like, and, somebody disturbed you. And then by your intelligence, you start making plans, what to do, how to counteract these unpleasant things, or how to increase the pleasant things in your life. So that's how it is, and that's why this is the hierarchy, and that's why it is there in this model of triune brain. by Paul MacLean.
Very interesting, Maharaji. Maharaji, one thing can you hear me? Yeah,
Yes,
one thing
yes.
I taught in the class was different, phases of sleep. So scientifically, we know that we have 4 phases of sleep, and this deep sleep is particularly characterized by delta waves. Delta waves are, I'm talking about wave waves. It is 0.5 hertz to 2 hertz, very slow frequency. And right now, you actually mentioned very interesting thing that it's actually when we are in deep sleep, what is there is chitta. Means we don't have any mind or any of those sense organs working. And of course, our body is like paralyzed. I actually give an example that if you're holding on to something when you sleep, you will drop it. If you were holding on to phone, oftentimes we find that this happens. So anyway, so my question is this delta wave can be taken as a biomarker for chitta?
Yeah.
Yeah. Some kind of curious about it.
Yeah. See, yeah, because as I said, yeah, I think it can be taken as biomarker for chitta, because ultimately chitta in its original stage, it's very calm, it's undisturbed. And in the deep sleep, this sort of state of consciousness is being restored. Whereas, in our waking state, we have this, beta waves, which are, which has such high frequency. And, there is also stressful beta waves. There are different also grades of beta waves according to the disturbance of chitta. So, yes, definitely deep sleep and delta wave can be taken as some sort of marker, at least in a first approximation.
Interesting. So this can actually give us insights into how EEG can be used, particularly delta.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Ask deeper questions about chitta. Yeah, I see another hand raised, Rohit Daspuria. Go ahead, Rohit.
Thank you, Maharaj, for such a nice class. This always question always puzzled me, because in Patanjali and the classical definition of Sankhya, so chitta is not considered a separate element. So it's a sum total of mana, buddhi, sankalpa.
Yes.
Like you say.
Yes. Yes.
Bhagavatam is clearly mentioned as a separate element. So always had this doubt. So I got some more clarity. Maharaj, can you once again tell why in Bhagavatam it has specifically taken as a special element, not in classical Sankhya? Can you explain that a little bit more?
I don't really know. I'm not such a big expert in classical Sankhya. I have. I know that there is a difference. They do have the understanding of chitta or mahat, but they call it buddhi. They call it differently. In general, my understanding is that in Srimad Bhagavatam, Vyasadeva, he synthesized all different theories which were existent about the reality into the coherent whole by taking the concept of Bhagavan as the personality of Godhead. So Srimad Bhagavatam is the synthesis, and when you synthesize something, some different, things, naturally the different, theories, they become enriched by the process of synthesis. So that's my explanation. The Sankhya of Srimad Bhagavatam is definitely much richer than the classical Sankhya because it takes advantage of other, other theories. Like in Srimad Bhagavatam, Vedanta, Yoga, Sankhya, and this. Agamic series of this vyuha, chaturvyuha, they all synthesized. Otherwise, they existed separately. In Agamas, there is chaturvyuha, Sankhya is separate, Yoga is separate, this is Vedanta is separate. So Srimad Bhagavatam is the mutually enriching synthesis of all these different, theories. And that's why they are somewhat modified, but at the same time, the best, the cream of them is presented in Srimad Bhagavatam in a much more complete and coherent way.
Thank you, Maharaj, so much. And a second point, Maharaj, like you said very interestingly, that the chitta is situated in the heart, and you said that there are more nerves, the neural network which is going from heart to control the brain, not the vice versa like we normally think. So maybe this also can be an area where we can study more. Maybe
yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So heart can be like a biomarker for chitta.
Yeah.
We can also do some
absolutely. Yes. The coherence of the heart, the different things, they're markers for the chitta. Yes.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Maharaji, for your kind time, and thank you, students, for patiently listening and interacting. Thank you again.
Thank you very much.
Take care.
Hare Krishna.
Namaskar.
Namaskar.